Picture this. A massive explosion tears through your position. 1 second you're standing there. Then the world flips. You're thrown into the dirt like a rag doll. Your ears are screaming, your vision is gone, and the air is thick with black smoke that claws into your lungs. You cough, stumble, blink through the haze, and then the horrible truth hits you. The supply wagons, the ones carrying your army's gunpowder, they've just detonated. You're a Spanish soldier in April of 1503, crouched in a shallow ditch near Cerignola, and in the span of a heartbeat, you've lost your ammunition. Panic spreads instantly. Men cry out that God has abandoned them. Some are praying, some are screaming, some are already running. And then, the ground begins to vibrate. At first it feels like thunder, but it isn't thunder. It's hooves. Through the smoke you see them. 12,000 French soldiers, led by the deadliest heavy cavalry in Europe, charging straight toward your broken line. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and now, potentially defenseless. This is the moment your stomach drops, because you know what French cavalry does to infantry. You've seen it. You've heard the stories, and now it's coming directly at you. But then something happens. In the middle of the chaos, your commander rides into the panic like it's nothing. Gonzalo Fernández de Córdoba, El Gran Capitan. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't hesitate. He points at the burning wreckage and shouts, "Good news, friends. These are the lights of our victory. We won't need artillery tonight." It's a lie. He's terrified. But the lie works. It stops the collapse. It forces 5,000 men to turn back around, grip their weapons, and face the oncoming wall of steel. Because this isn't just some battlefield disaster. This is the opening move of the Battle of Cerignola, April 28, 1503. The exact moment where the Middle Ages collide headfirst with the modern era. And before we dive deeper into this forgotten nightmare of survival and slaughter, if you enjoy uncovering the hidden truths of history, consider hitting like and subscribing for more long-form stories like this. And comment below where you're listening from. It still blows my mind that we can explore ancient battles together from opposite ends of the planet, connected by nothing but curiosity. Now, wipe the dirt from your face, look up, and watch what's coming for you. To understand why this should terrify you, you need to understand the enemy. The French army marching toward you isn't just a force, it's an undefeated monster. For over a century, the French gendarme, the fully armored heavy cavalryman, has been the apex predator of European warfare. These men are the tanks of the 16th century. They don't use tactics, they use physics. They smash into infantry lines, and infantry lines don't hold, they break. That's the law of nature on medieval battlefields. And what do you have? You have a ditch, you have a dirt rampart, and you have a weapon most knights consider a joke. The arquebus, a crude firearm, basically a metal tube strapped to wood. It's slow, it's inaccurate, and if you miss your shot, you're dead before you can reload. Yet Gonzalo has a plan that makes no sense to the military minds of his time. He isn't meeting the French on open ground. He's digging in. He has ordered you to turn this vineyard into a kill box. The explosion earlier was a disaster, but everything else is calculated. The trench in front of you is deep enough to stop a charging horse. The dirt wall is tall enough to shield you. And the French? They see you huddled behind your little mound like frightened peasants. They laugh. They're so confident in their own superiority that their commander, the Duke of Nemours, doesn't even wait for his full army to arrive. He orders the attack immediately. He wants to crush you before the sun goes down. As the French trumpets blare, the vibration becomes a rumble, then a roar. Thousands of armored horses surge forward into a gallop. This is the moment of truth. In the old world, the knights would ride through you, scatter your formation, and hunt you down like animals. That's how war has worked for centuries. But today, with your match cords burning and your arquebuses leveled over the dirt wall, you're about to introduce them to something they've never truly faced before. Because the panic is gone now. In its place is something colder. Focus. The knights are coming, and they have no idea they're charging into their own graves. To understand how insane this was, you have to understand what was coming down that hill. The French army in the early 1500s wasn't just an army. It was a cultural institution. The undisputed heavyweight champions of Christendom. And at the center of that power was the gendarme. Today the word gendarme means police officer. Back then, it meant man-at-arms. These weren't just soldiers. They were the elite of the elite. Aristocrats by birth, killers by profession. To put a single gendarme on a battlefield required the wealth of a small village. He wore Milanese plate armor weighing around 60 pounds, custom-fitted like a second skin. It wasn't just protection, it was engineering perfection, designed to deflect blades and shatter lances. And he rode a destrier, a war horse bred for violence. Massive, aggressive, expensive, sometimes worth more than the armor itself. In the Italian wars, the French gendarmerie was considered unstoppable. They had smashed Swiss pikemen. They had flattened Italian armies. They had humiliated anyone foolish enough to meet them in open field. Their tactic was brutally simple. The shock charge. No flanks. No clever maneuvers. Just line up knee to knee and hit the enemy center like a sledgehammer hitting glass. And it worked. Over and over again. Leading this terrifying machine was Louis d'Armagnac, the Duke of Nemours, Viceroy of Naples, a man of noble blood and even nobler confidence. Nemours was the perfect medieval knight, brave, dashing, and catastrophically arrogant. He saw war as a sporting match between gentlemen, and to him, the Spanish army under Gonzalo Fernández de Córdoba wasn't a real opponent. They were an inconvenience. For months, the French had chased the Spanish across southern Italy, and the Spanish kept retreating, skirmishing, withdrawing, refusing to give Nemours the clean battle he wanted. To Nemours, it looked like cowardice. He didn't understand it was strategy. He didn't see that Gonzalo was buying time. So when scouts reported the Spanish had finally stopped retreating and were digging in near Cerignola, Nemours didn't see a trap. He saw prey that had cornered itself. And now, he was about to ride straight into the future. Nemours' lieutenants told him to slow down. They weren't cowards. They were veterans. They could feel something was off. The French troops were exhausted. They'd marched all day under brutal heat, thirsty and dusty, and their supply lines hadn't caught up. Some of the older captains suggested something completely reasonable. Wait until morning. Let the men rest. Bring the artillery forward. Attack with full strength. It was smart advice, but Nemours rejected it immediately. He was insulted by the idea of waiting. To him, hesitation meant fear, and fear meant dishonor. He was driven by the toxic pressure of chivalric reputation, that medieval obsession with being the first to charge, the first to strike, the one who earns the story. He looked at the Spanish position, a low hill, some vineyards, a pile of dirt, and he dismissed it. Because Nemours didn't respect the shovel as a weapon of war. He believed spirit, elan, could overcome anything. That was the fatal flaw of the French nobility. They were fighting a war of prestige. Their enemy was fighting a war of survival. So Nemours ordered the attack immediately, without waiting for his full infantry support to arrive. He arranged his cavalry into 3 massive blocks and prepared to do what French knights had always done: ride straight at the enemy and crush them. The ground shook under the weight of thousands of armored horses. From a distance, it was magnificent. Steel flashing, silk banners whipping in the wind, the living image of medieval power. And from the outside, it looked inevitable. Like tradition itself was about to triumph again. But the truth is, they were riding into a new reality. They were charging toward a man who had spent his entire career figuring out exactly how to kill them. The French brought courage and gold to the battlefield. Gonzalo Fernández de Córdoba brought geometry and gunpowder. The juggernaut was moving, but the architect was waiting. While the Duke of Nemours was playing medieval hero, Gonzalo was inventing the modern general. History remembers him as El Gran Capitan, the great captain. And he was everything Nemours wasn't. Gonzalo was 50 years old, a seasoned veteran who'd already spent decades in the saddle. But unlike the French aristocracy, who treated war like an extension of jousting tournaments, Gonzalo saw war as a problem to be solved. He didn't love honor. He hated losing. And to understand why he was digging ditches at Cerignola, you have to rewind 8 years to a battle called Seminara. In 1495, Gonzalo met the French gendarmes in open battle for the first time, and he did everything right, according to Spanish tradition. He deployed light cavalry, genets, and sword and buckler infantry. He fought the way he was supposed to fight, and the result was a catastrophe. The French heavy knights smashed through his cavalry like they were paper. Gonzalo's army collapsed. He was humiliated. He escaped only because a loyal subordinate gave him his horse. Most commanders would have blamed luck, or blamed their men, or blamed God. And then they would have tried again the same way, hoping for a different result. But Gonzalo didn't. He analyzed the defeat like a scientist. He realized something fundamental, something that would reshape warfare forever. The medieval Spanish way of war, fast skirmishing, mobility, light cavalry, was obsolete against the heavy shock of French knights. You can't dance around a tank. You have to stop it. So Gonzalo did something radical. He rebuilt his army from the ground up. He studied the Swiss mercenaries and their massive blocks of pikes, long spears that could keep cavalry at bay. Then he looked at gunpowder technology, the thing everyone mocked, the thing knights sneered at as a peasant's toy. And Gonzalo combined them. Pikes to stop the horses, guns to kill the men, pikemen protecting arquebusiers, arquebusiers shredding anything that stalled. It was the birth of combined arms tactics, not heroic, not romantic, just brutally effective. Gonzalo also understood something most generals of the era never even considered: morale. A soldier who is paid, fed, and respected fights harder than a starving conscript. He ate with his men, slept on the ground with them, listened to their complaints. In an age where generals treated soldiers like disposable cattle, Gonzalo built something rare: loyalty. So when he told them those exploding wagons were victory lights, they believed him because they wanted to believe him. They trusted him, and his greatest weapon was his lack of ego. Nemours needed to attack to prove he was brave. Gonzalo didn't care if he looked cowardly, as long as he won. So when he reached Cerignola earlier that day, he didn't search for a flat field for cavalry charges. He searched for an advantage. He saw the vineyard's sloping ground. He saw soft earth, and he saw a ditch, maybe an irrigation trench, maybe just a marker line between vines. Not much at first. But Gonzalo didn't see a ditch. He saw a fortress. He ordered every man to dig. Officers, infantry, drummer boys, everyone. They widened it, deepened it. Then they piled the dirt into a rampart, a talus. And then Gonzalo did something vicious. He ordered wooden stakes sharpened and planted at the bottom of the trench and along the face of the wall. This wasn't chivalry. This was industrial efficiency. He was turning the battlefield into a machine designed to strip the French of the one thing that made them unbeatable: momentum. Because if a French horse hit that ditch, it would stall. And a stalled knight is just a heavy man trapped in a metal shell waiting to be opened. As the sun lowered, Gonzalo rode along his line on a small warhorse. He'd abandoned heavy destriers years ago. He didn't need to look like a knight. He positioned his arquebusiers right at the front, behind the dirt wall. Behind them, he placed German Landsknechts, mercenary pikemen hired to anchor the defense, forming a bristling forest of steel. On the wings, he stationed cavalry, not to charge, but to guard the flanks. He had built a defensive engine. But Gonzalo knew defensive engines are useless if the enemy refuses to attack them. So he needed the French to do what they always did. He needed arrogance. Fortunately, Gonzalo understood the French mind almost as well as his own. He was betting 5,000 lives that Nemours wouldn't be able to resist the bait. And as the French trumpets blared in the distance, Gonzalo stopped his horse and watched. The trap was set. The architect had finished his design. Now all he needed was the juggernaut to step inside. If you asked a military historian what the most important weapon at Cerignola was, they might say the arquebus. But if you asked the men standing there that day, they would have pointed to something simpler: the shovel. Because for hours, the Spanish weren't sharpening swords. They were moving earth. Under that blazing Italian sun, they transformed a shallow agricultural trench into a death trap. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't sophisticated like a castle wall. It was ugly, crude, improvised. But in war, ugly works. And now, as the French cavalry thundered closer, the ditch waited like a mouth in the earth, hidden by vines, invisible until the last moment. And behind it, you crouched, matchcord glowing, arquebus braced on dirt. Not a knight, not a hero, a technician of violence, waiting for the Middle Ages to die. You're crouched behind that dirt wall, gripping the one thing standing between you and annihilation. To the knights charging toward you, it's an insult. They call it the devil's stick, the thunder tube. You call it an arquebus. And yes, this is cutting-edge technology in 1503. But let's not pretend it's elegant. Operating this thing is like trying to perform surgery with a brick. It's a heavy, smoothbore iron tube bolted onto a wooden stock, 10 to 15 pounds of awkward weight. No modern trigger. Instead, there's a serpentine lever holding a smoldering matchcord, hemp rope soaked in saltpeter. To fire it, you lower that burning cord into the pan of priming powder. If it's raining, it won't fire. If it's windy, the powder blows away. If you pour too much, the weapon explodes and blinds you. If you pour too little, the bullet bounces off armor like a pebble. And the reload time? Agonizing. A skilled man needs nearly 2 minutes. In 2 minutes, a cavalryman can ride half a mile and skewer you without even breaking pace. So why is Gonzalo betting his life on this clumsy junk? Because of math. Cold, ruthless economics. To create a French gendarme, you need a nobleman. You need to feed him well for 20 years, train him in horsemanship, swordplay, etiquette. You need a war horse worth the price of a modern Ferrari. You need armor worth the price of a house. And when that man dies, he's irreplaceable. A lifetime of investment, gone. Now look at the arquebusier. He's a peasant. He was starving in Castile 2 months ago. You hand him a cheap iron tube. Teach him the loading drill in 2 weeks. If he dies, you take the gun from his hands and pass it to the next hungry recruit. The arquebus is the industrialization of killing. It removes skill from the battlefield. It means you don't need strength to pierce armor anymore. Chemistry does the work for you. A scrawny teenager can pull a lever and punch a hole through a duke who traces his bloodline back to Charlemagne. That's why the knights hate it. Not because it's dangerous, because it's humiliating. It democratizes death. It feels like cheating. But one arquebus is a joke. It's inaccurate beyond 50 yards. You couldn't reliably hit a door, let alone a moving man in armor. Gonzalo's genius was realizing that while one gun is worthless, 1,000 guns are a wall. He didn't train his men to aim. He trained them to fire together. A unit acting like a single weapon, like a shotgun stretched across an entire hillside. So as the French get closer, you blow on your match cord again. The ember glows red. Sulfur smoke stings your eyes. And somewhere deep down, you realize something terrifying. You aren't a warrior anymore. You're a machine operator. And the era of the sword is ending. The era of the bullet is about to begin. Back down the hill, the Duke of Nemours watches the smoke rising from the Spanish line, and he interprets it exactly as Gonzalo feared. Not as a warning, but as an invitation. To Nemours, that explosion proves what he already believes. The Spanish are incompetent, terrified, blowing up their own supplies because they're panicking. The sun is sinking. If Nemours waits too long, the Spanish might slip away in the night like they've done for weeks. And a knight doesn't wait for a better handicap. A knight attacks. So Nemours ignores the exhaustion of his men, ignores the fact his infantry is still miles behind, dragging their weapons through the dust. He turns to the pride of France, his heavy cavalry, and gives the order to advance. The French charge is a terrifying thing to witness. A wall of steel so dense that people say a glove thrown into it wouldn't touch the ground. At first they trot, then canter, then gallop, and the earth shakes like it's cracking open. But Cerignola isn't a flat bowling alley. It's farmland, vineyards, paths, uneven ground. The tall vines hide everything near the surface. From a saddle through dust and glare and fading sunlight, the Spanish position looks weak. The French see the dirt mound, but they can't see the ditch. They assume it's nothing. A shallow obstacle, something a destrier can leap. Nemours leads from the front, silver armor gleaming, feathers waving. He wants glory. He wants the first kill. The distance closes fast. 500 yards, 400. The thunder of hooves drowns out everything else. French lances lower, massive wooden beams tipped with iron, designed to punch through plate and bone. They're locked onto the Spanish flags behind the dirt wall, and only when they're less than 50 yards away, only seconds from impact, do they finally see it. The minor obstacle is a 5-foot-deep trench lined with stakes. The front horses slam on instinct. They rear, skid, and twist in the loose dirt. But you can't stop a freight train instantly. The horses behind are still charging. They crash into the ones ahead. And in one heartbeat, the greatest cavalry force in Europe becomes a pileup, a traffic jam of armor and screaming animals. And that is exactly what Gonzalo wanted. Because now the French are 15 yards away, stationary, confused, packed so tightly together you couldn't miss them if you tried. From behind the dirt wall, a signal, maybe a whistle, maybe a dropped sword, and then the command, Fuego. 1,000 arquebuses fire in the same fraction of a second. It isn't a series of pops. It's one earth-shattering roar. The air physically punches back. A cloud of white smoke explodes outward, swallowing the Spanish line. But the arquebusiers don't need to see. They know exactly where the enemy is. On the other side of the smoke, the effect is biblical. At point-blank range, accuracy doesn't matter. Lead balls slam into Milanese plate armor that has protected these men for generations. Arrows bounce off it. Swords glance off it. But physics doesn't care about tradition. A heavy lead ball at 10 yards punches through breastplates, shatters ribs, collapses lungs. It tears through helmet visors. It rips into unarmored horse necks. The front line doesn't just fall, it evaporates, a scythe through wheat. Men worth fortunes die before their bodies hit the dirt, killed by peasants they can't even see through the smoke. And then comes the second horror. The Spanish don't fire once. Gonzalo drilled them in rotating volleys. First rank fires and drops to reload. Second rank steps forward. Boom. Third rank. Boom. Rolling thunder. Continuous death. The French can't cross the ditch. They can't retreat because men behind them are still pushing forward, unaware of the slaughter. They're trapped inside a killing machine. Horses, maddened by smoke and noise and pain, stampede and trample their own masters. In the flicker of muzzle flashes, the vineyard becomes a strobe-lit nightmare. Shattered legs, falling banners, armor collapsing into dust. And in the middle of it, Nemours is screaming, trying to rally his men. In any other century, his death would be operatic, heroic, dramatic, remembered in song. But this is 1503. The rules have changed. Through the haze, an anonymous Spanish arquebusier spots the shimmering armor and the feathers. He doesn't offer a duel. He doesn't ask for ransom. He just raises the weapon and pulls the lever. A single lead ball strikes Nemours in the chest. It punches through his breastplate, kills him instantly. And the Viceroy of Naples, cousin of kings, falls into the dirt like anyone else. No final speech, no glorious stand, just deleted by a marble-sized piece of lead. With Nemours dead, the French brain is gone. What remains is a dying body. The Swiss mercenaries try to push forward, but the Landsknechts meet them, pikes colliding in a brutal grind. Yet momentum is gone. The French line begins to wobble. Gonzalo sees it. He sees riderless horses, sees confusion rippling outward, and he gives the order to advance. Spanish infantry swarm out from behind the wall, arquebusiers and rodilleros with steel shields and short swords. A knight on a horse is terrifying in open field. A knight trapped in mud, stalled at a ditch, surrounded by men on foot. Helpless. The Spanish hamstring horses. Knights crash down, and once they're on the ground, their armor becomes a coffin. They can't stand. They're swarmed, daggers finding gaps in visors and armpits. It's brutal, intimate violence, the revenge of the infantrymen. For centuries, these men were trampled under aristocratic hooves. Now they're dragging the aristocracy into the mud. The French panic becomes a rout. Swiss mercenaries retreat. The remaining cavalry turns and flees into twilight. The invincible French army isn't just defeated, it's dismantled. When morning rises, the numbers look unreal. 4,000 French dead. Spanish losses around 100. A 40-to-1 kill ratio. Cerignola isn't a battle. It's an industrial accident, where only one side gets hurt, and the shockwave spreads across Europe. Kings and generals realize the old world is dead. Because if peasants with shovels and cheap guns can erase the gendarmerie, then feudalism itself is broken. But for Gonzalo, this is only the beginning. He takes this proof of concept and builds something bigger. The Tercio, a moving fortress made of pikes and arquebuses. It dominates warfare for 150 years. It builds the Spanish Empire. And it all begins here, because one man decided digging a hole was better than dying with honor. Today, Cerignola is quiet. Vineyards and olive groves. A stone monument marks the spot. But if you stand there, you can almost feel the weight of history shifting. Because April 28, 1503, is the day the Romantic Middle Ages ran face first into the cold efficiency of the modern world. Honor didn't stop bullets. Tradition didn't stop gunpowder. And technology didn't care who you were. Efficiency was the only currency history accepted. And in many ways, we're living through our own Cerignola moment right now. Automation, artificial intelligence, drones, old hierarchies collapsing under cheaper, faster technology. The old guard calls it unfair, soulless, cheating. But the future doesn't listen. So the question isn't whether change is coming. It's this. Are we going to be the arrogant knight charging blindly into the past? Or the architect behind the dirt wall, ready to embrace what comes next? Thank you for joining me in the trenches of history. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Cerignola and the death of chivalry, hit like. It helps the channel survive the algorithm. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on so you don't miss the next documentary. And I want to hear from you below. Was the end of chivalry a tragedy or a necessary evolution? Does technology liberate us or just make killing more efficient? Let's talk in the comments. Until next time, remember, history isn't just about what happened. It's about who survived to tell the story.